Millionaire CEO followed a cleaning lady. Her secret broke him when he saw who she was feeding. The bag she hid. He watched her from the shadows, breath caught. The woman who mopped his marble floors every night, plain, quiet, invisible, now knelt in a cold alley beside a trembling child, pulling warm food from her worn tote bag like it was treasure. Sarah Mitchell didn't know he was there. She didn't know the man watching wasn't just her boss. He was James Holloway, billionaire CEO, the most powerful name in Boston tech. But James, he couldn't move. Couldn't speak. He should have been furious. She had been stealing. So why did it feel like he was the one caught? Shocking rule reversal. A billionaire watching a janitor with awe. Class inversion. The one with nothing gives everything. Emotional tension. Betrayal, vulnerability, silent connection. Compels a question. What is she hiding and why does he care? The night he followed her, the security footage didn't lie. For weeks she had been slipping through the back gate, always around the same time, always with a small bag clutched to her side like it carried something sacred. James Holloway didn't normally care what the staff did after hours. He paid them well, expected silence, and in return offered distance. It had worked, until Sarah Mitchell became the exception. She wasn't remarkable at first glance, 28, wore the same plain uniform, hair always tied back. She barely spoke. But tonight, something pulled at him. So, against every instinct, the billionaire followed his cleaning lady. He stayed a full block behind as she walked past Beacon Hill's ornate townhomes and into Dorchester's quiet decay. Streetlights flickered. The cold wind cut through his expensive coat. But he didn't stop. Then he saw it. She stopped in front of an abandoned lot where a woman sat on a crate, clutching a toddler. A boy, maybe 5, stood beside her, eyes hollow. And then, like magic, Sarah knelt and smiled. "I brought dinner," she said softly. "It's still warm. Chicken, potatoes, pudding for the boy." James froze. His housekeeper, the woman he barely noticed, was feeding a homeless family. Not once. Not twice. Regularly. Lovingly. With the kind of tenderness he hadn't seen since. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he watched her sit on the ground beside them. No judgment, no distance, just kindness. She touched the little girl's forehead, asked about medicine, ruffled the boy's hair. She turned that cold, empty corner into something that felt like a home. And for reasons James couldn't explain, it made something shift, fracture, inside him. Back at the mansion, he beat her home. He was still sitting at his desk when Sarah quietly knocked. "Is there anything else before I go, Mr. Holloway?" He looked up, and for the first time in almost a year, he really looked at her. Not just the uniform, not just the task, but the woman, quiet strength in her posture, a flicker of fear in her eyes. She had no idea he knew. "Come in an hour early tomorrow," he said. "Yes, sir." The door clicked shut behind her. James leaned back, heart strangely unsteady. Why had she never asked for help? Why did someone with so little give so much? And why could he not stop thinking about her? That night, across town, Sarah stood in her tiny kitchen, staring at the sandwich she'd saved for herself. Half of it, actually. The rest had gone to Kate and the kids, like always. She whispered to no one, "He knows." The thought made her stomach twist. If she lost this job, she lost everything. Not just rent money, not just food, but her one lifeline to the family she couldn't stop helping. And James? He sat alone in his glass-walled dining room, untouched salmon on his plate, phone buzzing with investor calls he ignored. All he could see was the image of a woman with work-worn hands sitting on the pavement, offering warmth in a world that had grown so cold. How do you punish someone for doing the one thing you've forgotten how to do? Chapter 1. The job offer no one expected. Sarah showed up early. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the strap of her worn purse. She had barely slept. The moment she stepped into the grand foyer of the mansion, the air felt heavier than usual. Her footsteps were silent on the polished floor, but inside, everything was loud. Her heart, her fears, her memories. She expected judgment. Or worse. determination. Instead, James Holloway handed her a coffee. He didn't offer explanations or small talk, just motioned toward the chair across from his in the study and waited until she sat. "I followed you," he said simply. She froze. "I saw where you went, who you helped. The little girl, Emma, and the boy, Noah." Sarah swallowed, her voice small. "I understand if you're letting me go. But please, just know I never took anything that wasn't going to be thrown away. I only wanted to—" "How long have you been doing this?" he interrupted gently. 6 months, she whispered. "I met Kate right after she lost her apartment. Emma had just been born. She didn't have formula. I couldn't just walk away." James was quiet. He sipped from his cup, eyes unreadable. "You've been feeding a family from my leftovers," he finally said, "while sharing half your own sandwich." Sarah looked down, ashamed. "It's nothing." "It's everything," he replied. She blinked, startled. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "I gave $3 million, 0 cents to charity last year," he said. "But not once did I sit down on the sidewalk with someone and look them in the eye." Sarah sat still, unsure where this was going. He turned back around. "I don't want to fire you. I want to hire you." She laughed once, bitter, confused. "I already work here." "No," he said, "not as a cleaner, as something else." There was a strange light in his eyes now, not cold, not distant, something urgent, personal. "I want to build something, a real center, a place where families like Kate's can get help that actually matters. Not band-aids, not handouts. And I want you to run it." Sarah stared at him. "You're serious? I never joke about money." Her voice dropped. "Why me?" "Because you already did it. With nothing. No budget, no staff, just leftovers and heart. That's more than most NGO directors I've met." She stood, pacing, shaking her head. "I have no experience, no degree. You don't even know who I am." "You're wrong," he said softly. "I know exactly who you are." She turned sharply, eyes wary. "You don't." There was silence. Then he walked to his desk, lifted a photo frame and turned it toward her. "My parents, they built Holloway Tech from a garage. When they died, they left me the company, and a responsibility I never lived up to." He hesitated. Then, 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. They say I have 6 months, maybe less. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because I'm running out of time to do something that matters." She stared at him, silent. Her thoughts spun. She could still walk away. She should walk away. But something inside her, something that had survived all the betrayal, the fall, the rebuilding, wouldn't let her. "What would I need to do?" she asked finally. "Find a building, assemble a team, start programs, build it from scratch. You'd have full access. Quietly, of course. My cousin Victoria. She'd kill it if she knew. So you'd be my assistant, on paper." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "This makes no sense. Why hide it?" "Because no one believes a billionaire wants to help people without an angle. And no one trusts a cleaning lady to lead anything." He held out his hand. She looked at it, looked at him. "And condition," she said. "I'm listening. I stay true to who I am. No pretending, no fancy titles, no games." James nodded. "That's exactly why I chose you." She took his hand. And somewhere, far beyond Beacon Hill and its gated walls, the ripple of that moment began changing lives neither of them had even met yet. Neither of them knew the storms ahead. But one thing was already certain. This wasn't going to be a transaction. It was going to be a transformation. Chapter 2. Ghosts we don't name. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat curled on the edge of her old couch, the one with the torn cushion she'd never replaced, clutching a mug of tea that had gone cold. Her phone lay untouched beside her. She'd stared at it for an hour, thumb hovering over the search history app. Her name, her past, her shame. Sarah Bennett. It wasn't a name she heard anymore, but sometimes she still whispered it into the dark, just to remember who she used to be. Before everything fell apart, before he ruined her, she hadn't expected James Holloway to look at her the way he did today. Not with pity, not with suspicion, but as if she mattered. And that terrified her more than being fired ever could. Because people who saw your worth, they asked questions. And questions led to truth. And Sarah had buried her truth so deep she forgot how to speak it. James was different the next morning. Less polished, more human. He met her at a quiet diner in Dorchester. Not the kind of place men in tailored suits visited. But there he was, already seated in a booth with 2 mugs of coffee and a stack of property listings between them. "Sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Me neither." They didn't need to say why. He slid one of the listings across the table. "Old warehouse off Quincy Ave. Needs work, but the bones are good. Could be housing upstairs, kitchen below. I'll bring in contractors to assess, but I want your instinct." Sarah glanced down. Her hands were still shaking slightly. "You really trust me with this?" He nodded. "I already did." The conversation drifted to floor plans, funding, staffing, but under every word was an unspoken tension, neither of them named. Sarah had questions too. Like why a billionaire with years left on his lease with the world was suddenly chasing a legacy in brick and hope. Why he wore pain like a second suit under his expensive one. Why his smile always seemed measured. But she didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, she listened. And every time he said "we," a small crack opened inside her carefully guarded chest. That evening, back at the mansion, Victoria Holloway arrived unannounced. Impeccable as always, her heels clicked across the marble floor like accusations. James met her in the library. "I see your assistant started early," she said, dryly. "Sarah Mitchell, right?" "She has a name," James replied, keeping his tone neutral. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Do you know anything about her?" "I know enough." "That's not what I asked." James didn't answer. He didn't have to. Victoria was already digging. She always did. Sarah stood in the kitchen with Martha, awkward in her new blouse and blazer. Simple, but unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's skin. "You okay, dear?" Martha asked, watching her carefully. "Trying not to trip over my own feet." Martha chuckled softly. "You're not the first woman to walk into this house through the back and come out the front." Sarah looked up. Martha leaned in, lowering her voice. "But you're the first who's come through with a heart like yours. He sees that." Sarah smiled faintly, grateful, but not reassured. Because people who looked too closely eventually saw everything. Later that night, Sarah unlocked the old storage box under her bed. Inside, carefully folded newspaper clippings, sealed legal documents, and a photo. David Benet, her late husband, the man who taught her how to lie and how to pay for it. She traced her fingers along the yellowed headline. Chicago financial advisor commits suicide amid $20.00 M fraud investigation. In the background of the photo, her. Young. Stiff in pearls, not yet shattered. She hadn't been guilty, not of the crime, but the world didn't need evidence when it had assumptions. She had testified, turned over documents, even risked her safety to bring the truth forward. But when David died, the narrative changed. The wife always knew. The gold digger. The silent accomplice. It didn't matter what the court said, the whispers lasted longer than the verdict. So she disappeared. 3 days into the job, Sarah stood in the middle of the warehouse James had chosen. It smelled of dust and forgotten dreams, broken windows, rusted beams. But she saw it. A training center here, housing up there, laughter, purpose, music in the hallway. She could see it. James walked in, watching her silently. "You like it?" he asked. "I do," she said. "It's broken, but it's not beyond fixing." He smiled faintly. "Neither are most things." She turned to him. The sun through the broken skylight made his expression softer, younger. For a moment she wanted to ask, "What happened to you? What broke you?" But instead she said, "People will talk about why you chose me." "I know." They'll say I manipulated you, that you're emotionally vulnerable. Are you? She looked at him. Hard. No. But they'll say it anyway. James nodded. Let them talk. She hesitated. And what happens when they find out who I really am? His face didn't change. I already told you, he said. I know who you are. And for the first time in years, she wanted to believe it. But ghosts don't just vanish when you stop naming them. They wait, and Sarah could feel hers getting restless. Can you ever outrun the past when it lives in your name? Chapter 3. Blueprints and Thunder. It started with a blueprint and ended with thunder. The sky was already gray when Sarah arrived at the mansion that morning. She had tucked her umbrella in the side of her tote, but didn't use it. The rain hadn't started yet, but it was coming. She could feel it. Everything felt like that lately, heavy, waiting to break. She carried new budget drafts, renovation timelines, and a folder of volunteer applications under one arm. Her new assistant ID pass was clipped to her jacket, but she still caught herself reaching for the mop closet sometimes, like muscle memory from another life. James was in the study when she walked in, sleeves rolled up, tie forgotten, hunched over blueprints with a pencil behind his ear. "Good morning," she said, startled to realize how casual her tone had become. He looked up and smiled. "You're early. You said we had to move fast." He gestured for her to join him at the long oak table. "Come look, I had the architects adjust the floor plan. We can add a vocational classroom here. It'll cut into the rec space a little, but I figured it was a fair trade." Sarah leaned over the prints, their shoulders barely inches apart. "That makes sense, but I'd flip the daycare and community kitchen. Families with small kids shouldn't have to walk across the entire building for a meal." He looked at her. "I didn't think of that." She shrugged. "You've never pushed a stroller uphill in the snow." He smiled again, softer this time. The thunder rumbled far in the distance, low and slow like a warning growl. Rain began to spit against the glass. "We should finish these by noon if we want to stay ahead of the contractors," she said, flipping a page. "We should," he echoed. But neither of them moved. The storm hit by late afternoon. Boston's storms had a way of rolling in, fast, no buildup, no polite knock. Just sudden downpours, lightning ripping the sky open, thunder loud enough to shake the chandeliers. Sarah flinched as the first boom cracked directly overhead. James stood at the window, staring into the rain like it spoke a language he understood. "Looks like the generator kicked in," he muttered. Then, without warning, the lights flickered once, twice, and died completely. Silence. No hum, no computers, no ambient lighting. Just the deep hush of a mansion gone dark. "Great," he muttered. "I'll check the backup. If coming with you." He turned. "It's the basement. I'm not afraid of the dark." He tilted his head, almost amused. "Didn't say you were." They grabbed flashlights, descended the narrow servant stairs, into the belly of the Holloway mansion. The basement was a different world. Old stone walls, thick with history and humidity. Long hallways, mechanical groans. The occasional drip of water from some unseen pipe. Sarah's flashlight swept across old furniture, sealed boxes, and ghostly sheets. "You really grew up here?" she asked. "No," he said. "We bought this place after the IPO. I grew up in Quincy. Split level, chain link fence, and a garage full of tools." She stopped. "You?" "Fixed things." He nodded. "My dad believed every man should know how to wire a socket and repair his own water heater. Guess it stuck." He pried open a metal cabinet and leaned into the fuse box. She watched him work. The careful hands, the easy focus. It didn't match the image she'd once held of him, this unreachable billionaire. Then the lightning struck, loud, close, and violent. The entire basement trembled, and without thinking, James pulled her close. His arms wrapped around her like instinct, shielding, anchoring. They stood like that for a second, maybe longer, her hand against his chest, his breath warm near her ear. She didn't move. He didn't let go. "I think we can let go now," she whispered, voice barely audible. He stepped back, almost reluctantly. "Sorry," he said. "You don't have to apologize." Their eyes met in the pale blue wash of their flashlights. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, But something far more dangerous. Recognition. He got the power back after 15 minutes, just a blown fuse. They returned upstairs quietly, but something between them had shifted. She made tea. He pulled up the budget spreadsheet again. It should have gone back to normal, but it didn't. That night, Sarah stood by the window in her small apartment, watching the rain streak down the glass. In the distance, thunder still echoed, softer now, like the sky was finally tired. She touched the ring on a thin chain around her neck, the one thing she had kept from the past. Not for love, for memory. Her name was still Bennett, even if no one said it out loud. Ghosts, she'd learned, didn't need names to haunt you. And James? James was starting to ask the kind of questions that could raise the dead. When two people both hide behind silence, what happens when the storm forces them into the same room? Chapter 4. Red Dresses and Glass Houses. The first time Sarah met Victoria Holloway face to face, she was wearing a borrowed blouse and carrying a bag that still smelled faintly of disinfectant wipes. The older woman, elegant, poised, perfect in every way Sarah never learned to be, studied her like she was a riddle scribbled in cheap ink. "You must be Sarah," Victoria said, as if the name itself tasted off. "The new assistant." Sarah smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am." "No need for the ma'am. I'm not your school teacher." She offered her hand like a queen would, not to welcome, but to test. Sarah shook it. And that's how it began. Victoria didn't ask questions. She made statements that sounded like questions, but were really thinly veiled judgments. "How long did you say you've known my cousin?" "Hem saw potential in me," Sarah replied. He's always had a soft spot for the underdog." Pause. Sip of espresso. Raised eyebrow. Sometimes to his own detriment. She said it with a smile, the kind of smile that burned quietly. Sarah stayed calm. She'd dealt with sharper knives than Victoria's tongue. But when Victoria leaned in and whispered, "Just so you know, this family has a long memory, and I don't like surprises," Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. Not fear. Recognition. Because Victoria wasn't unlike the prosecutors who had once tried to pin everything on her, or the socialites who crossed the street when they saw her after the Chicago fallout. Victoria didn't have to know Sarah's secrets to sense them. Some people just could. That evening, Sarah stood outside the community center build site, staring at the skeletal framework of beams and cement dust. She needed air, needed space. James joined her, jacket slung over his arm, hair slightly disheveled from meetings. "You okay?" "Fine," she lied. He didn't press. He just stood beside her, both of them watching the future rise slowly from ruin. "You know, I used to think I had to build something massive to prove I'd done something worthwhile," he said quietly. "Now, I think maybe just making a single corner of the world better is enough." She turned to him. "Victoria doesn't believe that." "No," he admitted. "She doesn't." Silence. Then, "She's digging, isn't she?" James hesitated. "She always does. And if she finds something?" He looked at her carefully. "Should I be worried?" "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "Do you scare easily?" That made him smile. Not a laugh. Just the subtle tug of lips that said, "You surprise me." "You'll tell me? If there's something I need to know?" She looked back at the half-built shelter. "Maybe." Days passed, the storm passed, but the unease lingered. And then came the fundraiser, the official launch gala for the Horizonte Community Center. James insisted she be there. "You built it," he said. "You should stand in it." She didn't have a dress. Martha fixed that, a classic black one borrowed, simple but graceful. Sarah barely recognized herself in the mirror. But James did. When she arrived at the event hall, all glass and chandeliers, he actually stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Wow," he said. "You look like a fraud," she whispered, adjusting the neckline. "Like someone who belongs here," he corrected. They mingled through a sea of donors, politicians, and photographers. And then Victoria arrived, wearing a red dress that commanded the room. She glided toward them, drink in hand. "Well, don't we clean up nicely?" "Victoria," James said evenly. "You look Dangerous, she smirked. I know. Then she turned to Sarah. I almost didn't recognize you. Black suits you, hides, things. James's jaw tensed. Victoria leaned in slightly. Just a friendly reminder, glass houses don't hold secrets very long. Sarah didn't flinch. Good thing I'm not throwing stones. Victoria's smile cracked, just barely. But it was enough. That night, Sarah walked the long hallway back to the guest room James had offered her during the late nights of project planning. It was temporary, she told herself. Safer than commuting back to Dorchester this late. Professional. But as she passed his office, the door opened. Hey, he said, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. You were amazing tonight. I stood still and smiled. You made it all look real. It is real, she said. He nodded. Yes, it is. A pause. Then he looked at her, not the way a boss looks at an employee, but the way a man looks at someone who's changed him. I need to ask you something, he said. She stiffened. Don't. He blinked. What? Whatever you were about to ask, she said, voice tight. Don't. Why not? Because I'm not ready to lie again. Silence. She stepped closer. I've told truths in courtrooms, James, truths that no one believed. And I've lived with the weight of being judged for someone else's crimes. I don't want to be anyone's redemption arc. I don't want to be cleaned up. He stared at her. You think that's what I'm doing? She shrugged. Isn't it? No, he said, and the word hit like a promise. I don't want to fix you, Sarah. I just want to know you. She swallowed, and for the first time since Chicago, she let herself wonder. What if that could be safe? Red dresses hide power. Glass houses hide nothing. And when you live in both, how long can the truth stay quiet? Chapter 5. The moment the lies collide. James Holloway had always believed he could control the narrative. That's what being a CEO had taught him, how to manage perception, how to sell conviction even when everything underneath was splintering. This wasn't a product launch. This was Sarah, and she didn't follow scripts. The morning after the fundraiser, the office buzzed with praise. The event had been a success, donations poured in, press coverage was glowing, and investors were intrigued by this mysterious, cleaning lady turned director of a social center built on compassion. But all James could think about was the look on Sarah's face when Victoria whispered something into her ear during the gala, the way Sarah's jaw tightened, the flash of panic she tried to hide. He hadn't asked her about it. Not yet, because he was afraid of the answer. Sarah, meanwhile, sat in the warehouse turned headquarters of the Horizonte Center, flipping through supply orders without really reading them. Her thoughts spun like laundry on high cycle. Victoria had shown her an old photo that night, folded, sharp-edged, still stained with scandal. It was Sarah at a gala in Chicago standing next to David Bennett, her former husband. Her destroyer. You really thought you could outrun your past? Victoria had murmured. You're smarter than that. Sarah hadn't answered. She couldn't, because Victoria wasn't entirely wrong. By late afternoon, James showed up at the center without warning. He found her alone in the kitchen area, sleeves rolled up, cleaning spilled coffee from the floor. Old habits die hard, she said when she noticed him watching. He didn't smile. Instead, he said quietly, Victoria confronted me this morning. Sarah went still. She thinks you're hiding something. I am, she said plainly. He blinked. Silence hung between them like a wire pulled tight. She stood and faced him. No defense in her posture, no excuses. I was married, she said, to a man named David Bennett, in Chicago. He ran a financial fraud scheme, millions of dollars. I didn't know, not until it was too late. James stared at her, and when I did find out, I turned him in, quietly. I gave evidence to investigators, tried to stop it before it collapsed. And then, he found out, and the next morning, he was gone. James didn't speak. She swallowed. They said I had to know, that I was in on it. No one believed me. I changed my name, I started over, I never stole from you, James. never lied to you about who I am. I just didn't tell you everything because I couldn't bear being judged for someone else's sins again." Still, he said nothing, until finally, "That's why you were afraid. Why you never looked me fully in the eyes until this week." Sarah looked down. "Yes." He stepped forward. "And you think this changes how I see you?" She didn't answer. "Sarah," he said, voice low, steady, "I lied, too." She looked up. "I made up the tumor." For a second, she didn't understand. Then the words landed. "What? I don't have 6 months left. I'm not dying. I made it up to justify the project, to the board, to Victoria, to myself. I didn't know how else to explain why I suddenly wanted to do something good." Sarah staggered back a step. "You lied about being terminally ill?" He nodded. It was the only story people would believe, that a cold, calculating man could suddenly care. A man like me doesn't get the benefit of doubt without a deadline. She stared at him, heart hammering. "So we're both liars," she whispered. James nodded. "Yes." Then he added, softer, "But I never lied about you." They sat in silence on the center's unfinished stairwell, the buzz of distant drills echoing like static. Rain started again, just a drizzle this time. "I spent years trying to be invisible," she said. "Now, I don't want to hide anymore, but I'm scared." "I spent years thinking control was the same thing as safety," he replied. "But I'm learning the truth doesn't wait for your comfort." I paused. She looked at him. "So, what now?" He met her gaze. "Now we tell the truth. To Victoria, to the team, to the world if we have to. And what if it all falls apart?" He reached for her hand. "Then we rebuild. Together." Later that night, Sarah pulled out the box from under her bed, one last time. This time, she didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She took the old newspaper clippings and fed them, page by page, into the fireplace. Not to erase the past, but to stop fearing it. The lies had collided. Now it was time to build something real. When the truth finally arrives, will it break everything or finally set you free? Chapter 6. The scandal that came too soon. Sometimes the truth doesn't wait its turn. Sometimes it kicks the door in, loud, uninvited, and 5 steps ahead of your plan. It started with a phone call. Sarah had just arrived at the center, the air crisp and wet from overnight rain, when her phone buzzed with Kate's name. "Sarah," Kate whispered, voice tight. "Someone came to the apartment this morning. A woman. Said she worked for a background check agency, but she showed me pictures of you from Chicago." Sarah's chest went cold. She asked how we met, how long I've known you. "She showed me a newspaper with your old name, Sarah Bennett." Sarah closed her eyes, heartbeat pounding in her ears. "She knows," she murmured. "She knows everything," Kate confirmed. "I think it was Victoria." Across the city, the Renaissance Hotel was glowing with soft gold light. Inside, Boston's elite gathered for another charity gala, one that James insisted on hosting himself. A public declaration of purpose. A celebration of progress. Sarah wore the same black dress from before, but this time she wasn't hiding in it. James stood beside her near the champagne bar, greeting guests, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. His hand grazed hers now and then, a quiet promise that she wasn't alone anymore. It was a lonely... And then, Victoria took the stage. Red dress again. Red always meant war. "Good evening," she began, voice polished like glass. "Before we continue with the thank yous, I'd like to address a concern raised by several stakeholders regarding the Horizonte Community Center." Sarah's breath caught, and the true identity of its so-called director. James turned sharply. "She's going to do it," he said under his breath. But Sarah was already moving, already weaving through the crowd. Her feet felt like lead, her heart like glass about to shatter. "A woman with a hidden past," Victoria continued. "A former socialite from Chicago, involved in one of the city's most notorious financial scandals. A woman who changed her name, inserted herself into a vulnerable position of trust." "Stop," James said, stepping up beside her at the podium. The room went quiet. All eyes turned. "Victoria, don't do this." Victoria tilted her head. "Someone has to tell the truth, James." "Then let it be me." James stepped to the microphone. The room held its breath. "I lied," he said. A collective gasp. "I told my board, my investors, and my team that I was dying from a brain tumor. Because I didn't think they'd understand why I suddenly wanted to build a place like Horizonte. I was afraid of being seen as weak, or worse, as emotional." He looked at Sarah. "I'm not sick, but I was broken." He turned back to the crowd. "And Sarah Mitchell? Sarah Bennett is not a criminal. She was married to one, and when she discovered what he had done, she turned him in, at great personal cost. She lost everything, and still chose to help others. She built this center with her bare hands. She gave families their dignity back. She gave me a reason to believe people can change." Silence. Sarah's chest ached. Every word felt like redemption, and also exposure. James looked directly at Victoria. "You want to talk about truth? Here it is. We built Horizonte on lies. But what we created together, that's real." Victoria said nothing. The crowd began to murmur, confused, shocked, moved. And then one clap, then another, and another, until the ballroom rang with unexpected applause. But the next morning, reality arrived like a wrecking ball. Headlines flooded the internet. Millionaire CEO lied about terminal illness to launch charity project. Director of Horizonte Center revealed to be widow of Chicago conman. Victoria Holloway pressured to resign amid Holloway tech scandal. It didn't take long for investors to panic. Stock prices dropped. Holloway Tech's phone lines jammed with reporters. Victoria? She disappeared behind locked doors. But James and Sarah were left in the open. Two people who had tried to do good by hiding who they really were. And now the world knew. By evening, the center was quiet. Everyone had gone home. Sarah sat on the floor of her office, folders open, hands shaking. James found her there. "I'm sorry," he said softly. She looked up, eyes red. "I should have told you sooner. About everything. No. I hope they eat sneakers." But she cut out, "Thank you for your time. They screwed this. This is horrific. I hope it was..." They sat together side by side on the cold linoleum. He took her hand. "We knew the storm would come, but not this soon," she whispered. James squeezed her fingers gently. "We'll survive it. When the truth comes early, uninvited and unkind, can love still stand in its shadow?" Chapter 7. When Silence Screams Louder. The world didn't fall apart with noise. It unraveled in silence. The week after the scandal broke, Boston moved on, but Sarah couldn't. She walked the center's hallways like a ghost in her own skin, answering questions from staff with a hollow smile, reviewing program reports with trembling hands, pretending the phone calls didn't go unanswered. No one said the word fraudulent to her face. No one had to. It lived in the space between glances, in the careful tone of voices that used to be warm, in the slight pause before someone said her name. The world hadn't burned her this time, it had just gone quiet. And somehow that was worse. James had gone quiet too. Not cold, not angry, just distant. He stopped showing up at the center without warning. Their morning coffee meetings became calendar invites with formal bullet points. The late-night text slowed to a trickle. And when he did call, his voice was tight, measured, like he was managing a crisis, not reaching for a person. Which, of course, he was. The board was threatening him with a forced step-down. Investors were circling like sharks. Legal teams combed through every dollar spent on the Horizon project. The cousin, who'd once tried to end Sarah's future, was now suddenly silent, buried beneath a public investigation into company funds. And through it all, the press watched. Sarah was tired of seeing her old life sliced into clickbait. Janitor turned director may be linked to scandal. Is Horizon Center just a PR distraction? No one cared about the kids who had bedrooms now, or the mothers working front desks with their heads held high. They just wanted dirt. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. Sarah arrived early, unlocking the center in the half-dark. An envelope lay on her desk. Inside was a copy of her original ID from Chicago, her real name, address, the photo she'd spent years trying to forget. No note, no threat, just proof that someone wanted her to know. You're not invisible anymore. Her hands shook as she tucked it into a drawer and sat down. A few minutes later, James walked in. His expression was unreadable. His tie loosened, coat soaked from the rain. You left this, he said, placing a flash drive on her desk. The latest proposal file. Thanks, she replied quietly. He didn't move. The room hummed with the weight of all the things they weren't saying. Finally, how are you holding up? Sarah looked at him. You tell me, I'm the story now, right? He didn't flinch. Sarah, don't, she said, standing. Don't try to save me with careful words. Just say it. Do you regret it? James looked down. I regret the lie, he said. Not you, but I am the lie, she whispered. No, you're not. You're the truth I was too afraid to face. Then quieter, but now everyone else sees it differently. And what do you see? She asked. He looked at her, jaw tight, eyes worn. I see the woman who gave everything when she had nothing. But I also see how much I've put you through. She stepped back. Are you walking away? I'm trying to protect you, he said. She laughed, a bitter, cracked sound. By pretending we never mattered. He didn't answer. And that more than anything was the answer. He left. Not slamming doors, not with a dramatic goodbye. Just walked out. The silence after was louder than any scream. That night, Sarah lay awake in her small apartment, watching headlights pass through the curtains. She thought of everything they'd built, the lies, the near redemption, the rainstorm in the mansion basement, the way his voice softened when he forgot who he was supposed to be. She had tried to believe she could be someone new. But maybe this was all she would ever be. A good intention swallowed by a bigger storm. The next day, she handed in her resignation. No speeches, no drama. Just a folded letter on James's desk. She didn't wait to see if he'd read it. Because sometimes the deepest heartbreak doesn't come from betrayal. It comes from being abandoned, quietly. Sometimes silence is more violent than words. Sometimes the loudest goodbye is the one no one says out loud. Chapter 8. The Reckoning Room. Some rooms you walk into knowing you won't walk out the same. Sarah stood in front of the boardroom door with her palms sweating, heart heavy, resignation already submitted. The glass wall before her reflected someone she hardly recognized. Not the janitor, not the fraud's widow, not even the director. Just a woman at her limit. She was done running. But before she could push the door open, it swung toward her. And there he was. James, tie loose, eyes rimmed in exhaustion, voice low. I was just coming to find you. Sarah didn't move. I already said what I needed to say. He looked at her for a long, long moment. You didn't let me say mine. Inside the boardroom, now cleared of investors, staff, and judgment, James shut the door softly. They stood at opposite ends of the long table. No assistants, no lawyers, no soft background jazz to distract from the weight in the air. Just the two of them. At last, I read your resignation, he said. She said nothing. You didn't even say goodbye. You stopped calling, she replied. I just matched your silence. He winced at that. It landed harder than he expected. You were trying to protect the project, she said. I know that. And maybe your name, maybe your company. But you forgot to protect the one thing that made it all matter. He looked at her sharply. You? I didn't need protection, James. I needed partnership. He stepped forward. I'd been afraid that I ruined everything, that I dragged you back into a world that already broke you once. I whispered. I chose this, she whispered. I chose you. You shouldn't have had to carry it alone, he said. A pause. Then I let the noise decide what we were, what I felt. I let their silence become mine. Sarah swallowed hard. And now? I don't want quiet anymore, he said. Not when it means losing you. He walked around the table, stopped just a foot from her. I lied to the world to start something good, but I can't lie to you anymore. She blinked back tears. Then say it, she whispered. He exhaled. I love you. It hit like a storm and a stillness at once. Sarah froze. No flowers, no music, no safety net. Just the rawest truth in a room built for power plays, not confessions. I love you, he repeated, quieter. And I know what that means now. It's not control, it's not guilt, it's seeing someone, fully, and staying anyway. Her voice shook. Why didn't you say it sooner? Because I didn't believe I deserved to. She looked at him, breath unsteady. I can't go back, she said, not to hiding, not to being your employee. Not to being the good story the press spins until they get bored. I'm not asking you to, James said. I'm asking you to be with me, in the open, as equals, as truth. I'll stand with you in front of every camera, every boardroom, every goddamn whisper, and I'll say exactly who you are. Who am I? She whispered. He smiled, soft and broken and real. The woman who rebuilt me, brick by brick, lie by lie, until I remembered what it felt like to care. The door opened suddenly. Victoria stood there, eyes swollen from fatigue, dressed in gray, no red war dress this time, just truth. They're ready for the press, she said. Sarah stood taller. James took her hand, not in hiding, not in hesitation, but with absolute clarity. Victoria looked at their joined hands, then nodded. Then let's give them a reckoning. Some truths aren't shouted, they're whispered in the rooms where everything else is fake. And suddenly they become the only real thing left. Chapter 9. The truth in their hands. Truth was never supposed to be a weapon, but that day it became their only shield. The press conference was set for 4:00 p.m. By 3:47, the room at Holloway Tech headquarters was already packed. Reporters, cameras, microphones stacked like hungry mouths ready to devour whatever came next. Outside, protesters held handmade signs, some in support of the Horizon Center, others accusing it of being nothing more than a cover-up. Inside, Sarah stood behind the curtain, her palms sweating, her heart pounding like war drums inside her chest. James stood beside her, calm, collected, but his fingers gently brushed hers every few seconds, not as a public gesture, but a private tether. Are you ready? He asked softly. She wasn't, but she nodded anyway. They walked onto the stage together. No speechwriters, no PR flags. Just the two of them, wounded, weathered, and ready. James went first. My name is James Holloway, he said into the mic. I am the CEO of Holloway Tech, and I am also a liar. Silence. Then the flashes exploded like gunfire. I lied to my team. To my board, to the public. I said I was dying from a brain tumor. I am not. It was a fabricated story to justify my sudden shift toward humanitarian work. Murmurs, gasps, a few curses under breath. I did it not to manipulate donations or mislead investors, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had never done anything real, and ashamed that it took watching my cleaning lady sit on the ground beside a homeless child to realize what humanity actually looks like. He turned. Sarah stepped forward. She adjusted the mic with trembling hands, her voice quiet but clear. My name is Sarah Bennett. A name she hadn't said aloud in nearly 6 years. I used to live in Chicago. I was married to a man named David Bennett, a financial consultant who deceived hundreds of people. When I discovered what he'd done, I went to the authorities. More murmurs. I lost everything. My home, my name, my reputation, even the truth. So I left. I came to Boston. I took jobs cleaning floors, and I stayed quiet. Until I couldn't anymore. Sarah looked out at the cameras. I fed a family from leftover food. That's how this began. And today, that family lives in a safe apartment, their kids are in school, and 10 more families have joined them. She looked at James. We built something good from broken pieces. Then, for the first time, she looked straight into the lenses. But we will not run from the past anymore. You can ask your questions, you can spin your stories, but we will stand here, because what we built is real. And now, the truth is in your hands. Questions flew like arrows. Was the Horizon Center a publicity stunt? Was Sarah truly unaware of her husband's crimes? Was James stepping down? Were they together? They answered one by one, with raw, unpolished honesty. No rehearsed lines, no strategic dodging. And something strange happened. The room stopped trying to break them and started listening. That night, they sat on the steps of the Horizon Center, exhausted but lighter. Sarah leaned her head on James's shoulder. Do you think they believed us? I think they saw us, he said. She looked up. I was terrified. He nodded. Me too. But you didn't let go. He turned to her. I will never let go again. And there, on the cold stone steps beneath a quiet Boston sky, Sarah realized something. The past no longer owned her voice, because now the truth lived in her hands. When you stop hiding and speak the truth, not perfectly but completely, you don't lose power, you reclaim it. Chapter 10. The Center That Love Built. The day the Horizon Community Center officially opened, it didn't feel like a ribbon cutting. It felt like a resurrection. Spring in Boston was slow to arrive. Cold winds still slipped through alleyways and over rooftops, but the courtyard outside the converted warehouse bloomed with hand-planted daffodils and chalk drawings. There were no limousines, no celebrity endorsements, just rows of plastic chairs, homemade cookies from the families who now lived in the upper floors, and the soft hum of second chances in the air. James wore jeans and a navy coat, no suit, no tie, just the man he had finally allowed himself to become. Sarah stood by his side, her name, Sarah Bennett, printed on the center's founding plaque by the entrance. No pseudonyms, no hiding. Kate was organizing the new daycare room, Emma strapped to her hip in overalls covered in finger paint. Noah chased Bubbles across the hall, squealing, with the kind of joy that once felt impossible for him. Victoria, out on early release due to medical leniency and model behavior, watched from the edge of the courtyard. Still elegant, still guarded, but different. She had sent Sarah a note weeks earlier that simply said, "You were never the liability, I was." The opening ceremony was brief but unforgettable. James spoke first, of failure, of fear, and of choosing courage anyway. Sarah spoke second, of loss, of survival, and of building something whole with what little you have left. The last speaker? Noah. He climbed the small stage, clutching Sarah's hand, and looked out at the crowd. My room has stars on the ceiling, he said proudly, and my mom doesn't cry as much anymore, so thank you. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtyard. As the crowd dispersed and volunteers guided guests through the center, Sarah wandered into the heart of the building alone. The hallway smelled of fresh paint and coffee. Voices echoed from the classrooms, English classes, resume workshops, GED prep, parenting circles. It was working. Really working. She stopped in front of the wall-size mural just installed by a local artist, a sweeping landscape of broken bridges turning into homes, and beneath it, the words, "You don't have to be whole to build something beautiful." James found her there, quietly watching. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. Stability? Hope?" He stepped beside her. "Love?" She looked at him. "Yes, that too." He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket. Sarah blinked. "No speeches," he said, "no grand gestures, just a simple question." He opened it. Inside, a delicate ring. Not showy, just real. The sushi. "Not because I want to erase the past," James said, "but because I want to build the future with you, brick by brick. Are you in?" Sarah looked at the center, the children laughing, the mural, the volunteers. and then back at the man who once followed her out of curiosity and stayed out of love. She smiled. "I'm in." That night, the light stayed on late at the center. The staff brought leftover cake. Kids ran in socked feet through the hallways. James danced with Emma in his arms while Kate taught Martha how to salsa. Victoria watched, half amused, half haunted. And Sarah stood quietly at the back window, watching her reflection blur into the city lights. She was no longer a fugitive of her own life. She was its architect. The strongest foundations aren't built on perfection. They're built on truth, forgiveness, and love that stayed. Brick by brick, heart by heart. Sometimes the stories that stay with us aren't the ones with perfect beginnings or easy answers. Sometimes they begin with a stolen meal, a lie told out of fear, a name buried in shame. And yet somehow, out of those broken pieces, something whole is born. Sarah Bennett didn't set out to be anyone's hero. She wasn't trying to be remembered. She was just surviving. Quietly. Cleaning houses, hiding her past, carrying her guilt like a second skin. And James Holloway, the billionaire CEO with a mansion full of silence, wasn't looking for redemption. He just followed a woman into the cold because he sensed something real. But what he found was the woman who'd clean more than just floors. She cleaned his conscience, his fear, his legacy. And in the end, he didn't save her. She saved him first. Because love, the kind that matters, doesn't come wrapped in romance or grand declarations. It comes in the moment someone sees you at your lowest and stays. Aaron comes when someone dares to tell the truth, even when it could cost them everything. It comes when two people lay their pasts on the table, unafraid of what breaks, and choose to build anyway, brick by brick, heart by heart. So maybe the question isn't, did she lie? Maybe the better question is, what kind of world punishes the ones who try to rebuild? If this story touched something quiet in you, if you've ever felt like your past was too heavy, too complicated, too stained, please remember, you are not beyond redemption. And someone somewhere is waiting to meet the real you, the one behind the silence. If you felt something, say something. Share this with someone who's rebuilding. And if you're still watching, the next story goes even deeper. See you there.